there's a lot been made of sort of about Mark Duggan's background, and the way the family, you know, have stuck by the fact that he was a well loved family member, community member, you know, and yet the media is consistently throughout, and especially now after the verdict has come out, tried to demonize him and defame him as this ruthless gangster, you know, like that in itself is some kind of justification for a man to be killed. It's
not,
you know, it's regardless of what someone has done with their life. We don't have a death penalty in this country.
Yes,
we do not have a death penalty in this country. So someone's background, regardless of what it is, things that they've done, if these things are true, doesn't make it lawful to kill them, especially when they don't have a weapon.
Yeah. And that's that. You were talking about the Daily Mail, and you read an article in the Daily Mail. I read the same article as well, where they talked about him as being a gangster. They sort of like went through this periodic kind of history of what he was about. So there was everything from what he'd done when he was a kid and getting arrested for cannabis, and then this whole thing about him picking up this gun from this person who was there's some vendetta about some little incident taking place at a barbershop, but basically called him, you know, one of the most wanted gangsters in Europe.
One of the most violent gangsters in Europe.
Did not get that.
But this is the thing that baffles me as well. It's that this idea that people like Diane Abbott or whoever else has come out and said that this is baffling. You know, they then get put under fire and saying that if they undermine this verdict, you're undermining the entire justice system, so you have to respect it. You can use that same logic very simply to say that Mark's arrest record is that he was done for handling stolen goods and for cannabis possession. Yeah. Okay. So if he's this major criminal,
big gangster,
he's never even gone to court. They're saying he's linked to all these different murders and all these other assaults. If he's never even gone to court, never mind gone to jail or been convicted of any of these crimes, surely you're undermining the criminal justice system by claiming that just because you know someone who's involved in another crime, you are therefore some kind of criminal.
Because you're supposed to be innocent before proven guilty.
Exactly. We don't have a death penalty, and this is supposed to be, as they keep on telling us, a democratic, free society with a free press, you know, but yet it's one rule to undermine something that is beneficial to the police, but yet it's totally okay for a major newspaper to completely undermine a criminal justice system that has very little records of any wrongdoing done by this man.
Are we saying then that racism isn't dead?
Oh, racism is alive and kicking because when you throughout the world.
Because what you're saying here, and I'm going to be quite direct about this, is it in relation to events that have black people involved, there seems to be no law in terms of what you can and can't do. It's kind of a free-for-all. You just go for it, and we can just about justify the reasons behind why you're going to say this. So you talked to me, I never heard this, but you talked to me about something you heard on LBC today, which was allowed to be aired. Daily Mail, it's out there. I've seen the Daily Mail today. I saw it online, and there was this thing where it's free reign. It's free reign to justify the killing of one Mark Duggan, but there's free reign when it comes to a black person. I go back and I look at, you know, when I was working at Choice FM and the whole Joy Garda being detained in custody and she died, and how I covered that for Choice FM. And at the time, how that wasn't getting any major publicity from the mainstream media. You know, we had to push that. You know, even Kiss FM, which is a music station, had news about Joy Gardner at the time. It was in the 90s, and nothing was getting kind of said in the mainstream until the latter part, after the post Stephen Lawrence inquiry, where institutional racism was bigged up. There is a massive problem, but you know, how can we make changes? You know, you had something, David Lammy said, you know, we need to be in these institutions to make these changes. Aren't we already? This is
a hugely complicated issue, okay? But there's a few things. I'll go back to the LBC thing this morning. I heard Nick Ferrari, I'm sure his name is, on LBC this morning, claiming that there should be no vigil for Mark Duggan by his family or anyone in his community because he was a gangster, and therefore he said literally he's not Nelson Mandela, he was a local gangster, a petty gangster, and therefore there's no reason why people should be honouring his death. There's nothing there to honour.
There's a life lost.
There's life lost. There's life lost of a man who has a family, who has
children.
6 children.
Oh, is it 6?
Who has brothers and a family. It's simple as that. Has a family around him who loved him clearly. You know. So a woman decides to call up and say a gangster has died. This is normal. This is why is a big deal being made of it? It's a good job by the police. That's all. How can these things be allowed to be said? You know.
What did he say?
He kind of rushed it off, but he didn't say anything against her. He didn't. He said the difference is it was by the police, and that's what makes it a big deal. And because there was riots afterwards, and it's been headline news. This is the reason. This is what I mean. If this was, for example, Lee Rigby, if such a thing had been said about Lee, no. I mean, this is a completely other, a different discussion that needs to be had. But if something like that had been said about Lee Rigby, there probably would have been riots. You know, this is the difference. Okay, and another thing that's which moves to then this idea that for me, this of course it's clearly about Mark Duggan and his family, but what Mark represents is any of us, black people, and importantly, poor people. Working class people, it's another thing. They're trying to separate this idea. I mean, he's mixed race. Half of his family is white, and yet this is being dealt with purely as a black issue, completely separating white people's responsibility from this issue. You know, this isn't a UK issue. This is a black community issue and a relation. But yet this man has a white mother. Surely white people, Asian people should be equally as outraged by this as anybody else. But no, it's purely something for the black community. Mark Duggan is the latest high profile case of a long string of black people and, you know, white people as well, who have been killed in police custody, like the Joy Gardner, the Sean Rigg, Roger Sylvester, Smiley Culture, you know, local celebrities, you know, musicians, people who we know and who have been murdered, and there's been no justice. And what's really, really important is that this is the thing. For a long time, people have been saying there's been no police officer ever convicted for the murder of a black person or anyone by police. There's one, David Oluwale in Leeds, 1969, was killed by police officers and dumped in a river. The usual same sort of trumped up, you know, all white jury, similar tactics were taken, but the evidence was so overwhelming that they had to be put down. As a direct result of this, the inquiry system was set up as a sort of
buffer.
Yeah, well, yes, the exact word, I saw an interview with Carla talking about this. The exact word he used, a buffer between this is a mistake. We can't ever let this happen again. Let's create this thing so that to ensure that even if it is to go to court, they have to at least first go through this, and none of them have ever made it through that inquiry buffer. You know, what do you make of this so-called free society, this democratic state? You know, and again, and then again as well, I don't want to take away from this issue of African people, because it always seems as well that whenever we want to talk about racism, the subject gets changed. You know, it's you know, feminism or I don't know, other kind of struggles get brought up to say, oh, but this is classism, things like this.
Yeah, I don't want to take away from this.
Let me just make one point. Sorry, before we go on, there was a barrister in Chelsea, you know, wealthy area, one of probably the most affluent area of London. Okay, a man who has probably the most respected job in the world. Yeah, he's a barrister. Okay, and this man, after hours of drinking and cocaine abuse, had a huge shotgun and started letting off shots in his house and out of his window. Drunk and coked up. The police negotiated with him for 5 hours. He stuck
a couple of years ago.
He stuck his head out of the window with the shotgun pointed vertically at the sky. He wasn't shot. It was only when he raised it down slowly to a level where he could have fired at someone that he was shot. 5 hours and holding the gun in his hand out the window. Then he was taken out. Mark walked out of a cab, hands in the air, witness statement saying this, hands in the air, nothing in his hands apart from his BlackBerry, and was shot down instantly. This whole split second thing that they don't have enough time.
Because he was black?
Because he was black. And this thing that his brother said about our lives being worthless, this disparity.